Hi, I'm Jac-Ann Marie, and I am a fantasy author and developmental editor of fantasy. Today I'm going to cover what goes into my editorial summary letter, which you receive after your edit has been completed. Each editor is going to have a different editorial letter that they send that has different things broken down, resources, explanations, details, specifics, etc. in their editorial letter. This is just one example of how I do mine. The first page breaks down the overview and purpose, overhead feedback, which I give general statements after I've completed the edit of overhead feedback, like big, broad things that I have noticed. This includes what readers would love about this story, in my opinion, what some readers may not enjoy or understand, tropes and micro-tropes, and my personal favorite part of the story. All of those can be used for marketing purposes, so that's really helpful for authors. Then I go into genre, which I list out what your genre is, what I think it should be, and if it matches up, and then expectations for the genre, and if those expectations of genre have been met. Next, I go into thematic focus. This talks about your overall themes of the story, which is different from your genre, so thematic focus and tone kind of play together. Then there's a whole section on plot structure. This does not mean that you as an author have to have a plot structure. This is me breaking down your plot, and it's helpful if you have used a plot structure specifically to let me know what that was, so I can make sure that you're hitting the right points in that specific structure. Otherwise, I will take an overview of your whole plot, break it down, and then I can then impose a plot structure that would work for it, or that you could use to describe how your story is presented. It basically just helps you identify key points in the story and if those are hitting at a good place or not. Specifically, things like the hook, the inciting incident, the midpoint, darkest moment, climax, and resolution. So all of those have specific places where they should be hitting. If your darkest moment is happening at your midpoint, then the last half of your story might feel a little bit flat, as an example. Then there's a whole section, which is my favorite part, of pacing. Pacing is incredibly important. This is basically if a reader's going to keep going or put your book down. I won't dive too deeply onto what I break down for pacing. I do have a pacing scale that I use, and things that I'm looking at for pacing is prose, sentence length and variety, how many microbeats and complexity you have in a chapter, detail and clutter for the chapter, action versus reaction or recovery, scene sequel balance basically, and time passing, like how much time has passed in this chapter, and then tension and suspense. Arguably, the tension and suspense is going to be the main element that I'm looking at. Not every chapter has to be tense and have a lot of suspense, but that is something that really drives up the pacing of a chapter. And so I break down whether your chapter is basically low, middle, or above average. And you want to have variation in that. You don't want to have like all high intense scenes. You want to have those moments of lull. You don't want to have it to the point where things are crawling by, but you do want to have those moments where you have a little bit of lull. So that's what the pacing section of my editorial letter identifies. So then you can go back in for your edits and take care of that. Of course, with fantasy, we have to have a world building section, and in my editorial letter, I break down the world in feedback to the setting and the map, magic system, species, politics, agriculture, and then the retail and money system. All of those things play a role in establishing a world. There is more complexities to things and micro sections that fall into those big broad categories, but I break down any detail that I see, I put into this little area, and that way you have a comprehensive list of all of the things that make your world your world. Of course, I break down the characters, and I am looking at suggestions for your character's arc and growth, areas of opportunities, relationship believability, not specifically romantic. It could be best friend and friend. It could be parental relationship. It could be mentor-mentee, trainer-trainee, and it could have romantic arc. I do have a separate section for the romantic arc, but in this character section, I look at relationship believability, and then I also have added in a diversity and inclusion, where I take a look at a few different film tests and you apply that to the novel. So it would be like the Fry's test for disability inclusion, the Bechdel test for female representation, and Duvernay test, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, which is for diversity representation of persons of color. And then the Villalobos test, which is the Latina woman representation. These are some newer aspects that I have decided to incorporate into my editorial letter. Not all of them will apply to every manuscript, but I am going to mention it just because I think it's really important to be portraying diversity and inclusion in a way that really uplifts. So I'm going to be including that also. If the author requests me not to, I obviously won't, but I would like to include that in my editorial letters, just because I think it's important. The next part is the romantic arc. Like I mentioned, this is going to be just the plot points, basically, or the micro moments of the relationship arc. So it's going to be your meet cute or starting point, important moments, big and small, including the page number, happily ever after, happily for now, or ending point. So identifying those will let you know if you have a relationship arc that is believable and relatable, because you don't want it to go from here all the way up to here, just straight linear line. You want to make sure that it has ebbs and wanes and flows and ups and downs and all the things. You also don't want to start here and end here. Like, there's not much movement there. You don't want to have that. Usually you can start with like lust and then end with love, which is kind of the same, but you still have like this arc that happens, because you're lusting for somebody and then you're like really, really wanting them, and your relationship really starts to develop, and then you end up in a place that's like a happy ever after, or happily for now. So I identify all of those moments, and then you have an overview of the relationship arc, which is super helpful. I also break down like character sheets, so the physical description, personality traits, perception of, which is what other characters view this person as, and then motivation for the character, what they want and need, their flaws, which is really important to make sure that your character remains true to themselves throughout the whole manuscript. Their voice carries through, and you're not changing their tone or their wants or needs halfway through without some kind of event happening to trigger that want or need change and shift. All of those things are really important, so I break those down for you as well. I also have chapter summaries, which include favorite lines, the summary, what the whole chapter was about, and then suggestions and overall thoughts. I do inline comments, so you'll have all of those in the document, but this chapter summary part really is nice for, one, pulling quotes to mark it, the summary, so you have an outline basically of each chapter and what it's about, and then condensed thoughts. So instead of having to scroll through 50 comments in a chapter, you have my overall thoughts and opinions of the chapter. At the end of it, I have a section for notes, which is just random other little tidbits of things that I have come across or wanted to ask questions about, or resources that I wanted to inform you of, stuff like that. That's the section for notes. I also have questions for the author and questions I ask as a reader, because I am an editor, so I will have questions for you, the author, but I also am a reader because I'm reading the manuscript, and a reader is going to have different questions than an editor. So I include both of those things, and those are also really helpful. So if I'm a reader and I'm questioning, what was the motivation of her killing the king? And you're, as the author, you're like, oh, well, I thought I explained that. It wasn't clear. So then you can know that that's an issue that you can address in your edits after I do my developmental edit. And then, of course, at the very end, I will include all of the resources and tools that I use to create this, first of all, and then also ones that I have mentioned in comments, inline comments, such as, Gina Denny has a really great 8-point plot beat sheet. That's a mouthful. That is really helpful if you would like to input your plot into there and see where you can adjust for your pacing, if your word count is off or really super high, or et cetera, et cetera. I'll include all of that stuff at the very end. So you'll have a list of resources that you can use and look at the ones that I have used and improve your craft that way as well, doing your own information, research. And that's what my editorial letter is all about. So there you have it. If you'd like to book services, the link is in my bio. You submit a sample edit, and then I send a summary of this, like a shortened, condensed version, and then we'll get right into it.